Hey guys, welcome to the 2 a.m. pipe on the patio. Back out here on the patio. And I am smoking my Peterson Newgrange B10 spigot. It's one of my most beautiful pipes that I own. I absolutely love this pipe. And in it, I'm revisiting an old friend, H&H Old Dark Fired. I haven't smoked this in quite a while. Used to be my favorite tobacco because it reminded me of barbecued chicken. That is a good tobacco, boy, I'll tell you. Dark Fired Kentucky. Good stuff. So I've been sitting out here listening to my little transistor radio that I've had forever. It got me to thinking, which is always dangerous. It got me to thinking about when I was young. Back in the early mid-70s. When I was 10 years old, that would have been December of 1969. My brother bought me a Panasonic AM/FM radio. May have been 1970. I may have been 11 for my 11th birthday. But he bought me a Panasonic transistor radio, and I was never without that radio. Wherever I went, that radio went with me. And that was the beginning of my love affair with music. You know, back then, we didn't have iPads or iPhones or internet or any of that kind of stuff. The one thing that tended to bring everybody together, that you all talked about and everything, was music. And I remember being in high school, and he'd be in class, and just before the class would start, somebody would say, "Hey man, have you heard Joe Walsh's new album, So What?" have you heard Zeppelin's new album? Have you heard, we always talked about music. Have you heard Robin Trower's new album? It's what we all talked about. It's what we all had in common. We all loved music, and whether it was albums or the radio, it was important. I can remember getting a new album, an actual record. I'm so old. And calling my friends up and saying, hey man, I got Trower's new album. I got Clapton's new album. I got, whatever it was, Dickie Betts' new album. Come on over and we'll listen to it. And they'd come over and we'd sit in the middle of the living room floor. And we'd have the stereos set up. You'd sit in the middle of the floor and you'd turn it on. And you'd just listen. And you'd pass the album back and forth so you could read the liner notes. One guy be reading the liner notes and the other guy be reading if there was stuff inside, on the sleeve, lyrics or whatever, they'd be reading that. I can't tell you how many times I did that in my youth. I had a buddy, Tim Griswold, who used to call me up on the phone and say, listen to this tone Leslie West is getting on his guitar. And I'd listen to it over the phone. Over the phone. An actual landline phone. But he'd turn his stereo up and he'd hold the phone in front of the speakers so I could hear what he was talking about. And then we would talk about the tone, the tone he was getting. Leslie West and his golden tone. It was just such a cool time to be alive. But nobody was ever without a radio. There was always a radio. Somebody had a radio wherever you went. If you were just sitting out in front of the house, you had you had your little transistor radio with you, and everybody was huddled around listening to Green-Eyed Lady or whatever the big hit was at the time, and somebody'd say, oh man, I really like this song. This is a good one, check this one out. This is Sugarloaf. It's Green-Eyed Lady. So everybody just kind of stopped because the guy really liked this song. So everybody would just stop what they were doing and listen to the song, And I can remember the first time I heard Green-Eyed Lady. I was on Woodrow Avenue in Lemon Grove, California. And we were playing outside. And one of the kids said, I love this song Green Eyed Lady by Sugarloaf. Check this out. It was just coming on the radio. We stopped everything. We stopped what we were doing and just sat there and listened to it. And I remember the guitar in that just being like so huge sounding to me. And I just thought, man, that's a really cool song, you know. And of course, my brother was 9 years older than me, so he guided me through music big time. And he is 9 years older than me, still alive. But he turned me on to so much good music. Cream and Mountain and Derek and the Dominoes and Roy Buchanan and just so many different bands. And he gave me my first blues album, which was T-Bone Walker's Imperial Sides, double album. And I just was under the spell from that moment on. We had been watching a TV show. I've talked about this before. We'd been watching a movie called The Watermelon Man with Godfrey Cambridge. And in this movie, Godfrey Cambridge goes from being a white man to a black man overnight. And his wife divorces him. He used to race the bus to work. He'd run along the bus, and the people in the bus would cheer for him every day. Then when he became a black man, everybody started rooting for the bus driver to beat him, you know. It was an interesting movie. And but in that movie, there was some blues music, and I remember hearing this song and turned to my brother and saying, "What kind of music is that?" And he said, "That's the blues." And I said, "Well, who plays that?" He says, "Clapton plays the blues." Well, I've been listening to Cream and stuff like that, and nothing Cream did sounded like this. This was the real gut bucket, real thing blues, you know. And it just shook me to my core. And then the next day he came home and gave me that T-Bone Walker album. And that was all I listened to, night and day. I'd put it on my turntable in my room, and I'd set it to just keep playing, you know, so it would finish the record and go back and start all over again. And I'd listen to it while I was sleeping, all through the night. Just in love with the blues. When that started me on a journey I'm still on till this day, and that is, you know, just studying the blues. Going, you know, I started with Clapton, and I started going back from Clapton, and you know, he talked about Freddie King and Muddy Waters and Albert King and B.B. King and Otis Rush, and so I started buying all these guys' records and just going backwards, and I got to Robert Johnson. And I was not prepared for Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson's music was just raw and emotional, and it wasn't polished like B.B. King, you know, or even Freddie or Albert King. It was just this raw exposed nerve. And I wasn't ready for it. It took me a while to really get into Robert Johnson. And but once I did, that sprang off a whole other branch to go study, and then it was Charlie Patton and Big Bill Brunzi, Blind Lemon Jefferson, and all those guys who played that kind of music, and it really just changed my life. But music back then was like kind of like politics is now, where everybody's all wrapped up in politics now. Back then everybody was all wrapped up in music, and you had your rock group guys, and you had your disco guys, and you had your guys like me who were blues guys, who were really the bizarre ones, and you even had country guys who like country music. But it just sitting out here listening to the Transistor radio today, really got me to thinking about music and how important music was back when I was young. And basically still is for me, but it was a special time when I was growing up. I remember going in high school, walking through the halls of the school, and you'd hear music playing in the classrooms. You'd hear Rainy Day Woman by Bob Dylan playing in here, and you'd go a little further and you'd hear Boston or Kansas, Zeppelin, whatever was big at the time, would be playing in the classrooms. Guys would bring radios to the classroom and in between classes. Or even in some classes like photography and art. They would play music. It was just a special time, and those times are gone now. I don't see my kids getting excited about music the way we did. McKinley kind of does. She's got some good taste in music. Every once in a while she'll play something. She'll go, "Dad, listen to this. I think you'll like it." And usually I do. It's kind of a bluesy rock thing, and she's turned me on to some good stuff over the last few years since she was in college. And it's been awesome. And so, anyway, that's just kind of what I was thinking about sitting out here listening to this. was how important a transistor radio was in my life growing up. It was just, it went everywhere with me. And this is an old Radio Shack realistic transistor radio here. It's from the late 70s, early 80s, something like that. I don't know the exact date of it anymore. You know, I still have, radios are an important part of my life still to this day. And it just doesn't, there's nothing quite like it when you get right down to it. Music is something special, man. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one. Let me know if you still got your transistor radios. I'd love to see them. Catch you later, guys. Have a good one.